Hey there, nerds. I'm Family Doctor Jordan Breeding, and welcome to Brain on Crack, the only show that doubles as a babysitter while you head out to the dog track or the horse track or, wherever adults go. Line dancing. And speaking of things that adults do, despite movies actually being perfect for avoiding talking to our families, a lot of films can't help but remind us that our relatives exist. That's why we get movies like The Godfather, Terms of Endearment, and that one where Steve Martin raw dogged way too much. And Hollywood isn't slowing down with the familial stories, and that's causing some oddly specific family-based tropes to keep popping up over and over again, like Steve Martin's rock-hard love for his wife.
Looking for a girl? Wants to do a little of this, okay?
More and more blockbusters feature a protagonist who, in the end, forgets their blood relations and embraces a new family, usually comprised of a ragtag gang of lovable miscreants. Of course, the most obvious example is the Fast and Furious movies, in which the prevailing theme of the franchise is life is mostly about loving your greasy, muscular family so that you can later rob people and or maybe save the world. And to hammer that home, the characters constantly say the word family like they're being held hostage by an Olive Garden.
When you're here, you're family.
And while it may have fewer Tokyo Drifts and Coronas, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 does the same thing, but even more explicitly. Star-Lord discovers his dad is Kurt Russell, which sucks. And even worse, it turns out that he's also an evil anthropomorphic planet monster who apparently believes Dairy Queen's slogan should be, "The woods behind our stores are perfect for impregnating women." That's what I like about it. So Chris Pratt kills his dad and realizes Rooker Smurf was his true father all along, and also a bunch of raccoons and tree people all agree they're family now.
He may have been your father, boy, but he wasn't your
Wet ass P-word.
Shazam and the 2016 Ghostbusters remake end with a group of friends accepting each other as a new family also, and the weirdest example of this trend is definitely Suicide Squad, the one with no the.
Drop the.
Towards the end of the movie, though, the titular gang of hardened criminals who look not unlike a waterlogged Evanescence cover band have a brief drink together and chat for like 4 or 5 minutes. Then, in their final battle, El Diablo... It's a stupid name for a superhero.
Have you heard of the pyrokinetic homeboy?
El Diablo, the tough guy with the superpowers of a 6-year-old Drew Barrymore, sacrifices his life because he doesn't want to lose another family. But really, these guys are now your family? You literally just met them like a day or two ago. You think that these clown hookers and crocodile mutants with whom you shared a quick shot of Jim Beam with are on par with your dead wife and child? Does your wife dress up as a clown hooker? Doubt it.
Why not?
And see, that highlights the sad relevancy of this movie trend. As your grandma is always telling you, the divorce rate is actually pretty high in America, and it's thankfully on the decline, but even still, it's estimated that 50% of today's kids will experience a breakup of their primary family unit at some point. Now, sometimes this is totally necessary, but it's undeniable that kids tend to not love when their parents split up.
Is it our fault? Is it because we were bad?
And then those kids grow up, and some of those kids write movies. Like, for example, the writer of Shazam was raised by a stepdad, the writer of the Ghostbuster reboot was a child of divorce, the guy that wrote Suicide Squad and was a writer on the first Fast and Furious was kicked out by his parents when he was a teenager, and even James Gunn went through a divorce back in 2008. Maybe it's no coincidence a big chunk of modern action movies are written by people desperately wanting to believe family is something you can choose rather than what's foisted upon you by simply existing. That's both pretty cool and a little sad, but don't think about it too long. Explosion, car chase, space rat. Speaking of not having the traditional number of parents, one of the easiest ways to get us to sympathize with a character is to have them lose their mom, be it Bambi or Cinderella or Belle from Beauty and the Beast. Basically just every Disney movie character. And just pray that Walt Disney doesn't thaw out one day and come after your mom. Or on your mom.
You can't imagine how excited I am to finally you.
That was so scary. He got the little mustache.
He's got that little mustache. Dude, he's like, I love the Nazis and I'm coming on your mom. And I'm like, no. We're still killing everybody's moms today, but now instead of blowing away dear mommies, recent action movies keep featuring a character mourning the loss of their human mommies.
Mommy? Sorry, Mommy?
But in a decidedly action-packed twist, they'll almost always later discover that Mommy is really alive in some secret magical place, now significantly older than when we last saw her, and usually sporting some new freaky armor. Ooh. Anyway, Aquaman learns his mother was executed for presenting her cloaca to a landlubber.
Wet ass
Cloaca.
And that's something that I honestly don't disagree with. But then much later in the movie, Aquaman falls through some sort of underwater wormhole or aqua hole or blowhole and amazingly finds that Atlanta has been alive this whole time, just living inside of an abandoned AMC.
We need that, all of us. That indescribable feeling we get when we come.
No, but really, she's on a dinosaur-filled beach at the Earth's core because... And at first, Aquaman doesn't recognize her because she's wearing some kind of crazy lobster xenomorph suit, but then she takes her helmet off and reveals that she's his mom, but with gray hair to denote the passage of time. In Ant-Man and the Wasp, Hope believes her mom, Janet, is dead, but then Scott starts dreaming about Michelle Pfeiffer like pretty much everybody did in the 90s, and they realize she's maybe alive inside the quantum realm, prompting Hank Pym to launch a full-blown acid flashback nightmare rescue mission. And what do you know? They find a stranger wearing some kind of armored suit that just so happens to be Hank's not dead wife's sexy
Cloaca.
She's been living inside of this psychedelic hellscape for literal decades because Marvel needs a couple hundred backup realms and universes just in case they need to retcon something later.
Such a lucky girl.
In How to Train Your Dragon 2, young Hiccup reunites with his long-lost mother who again turns up alive in a mysterious faraway land and wearing some pretty off-putting armor.
But a mother never forgets.
This trope was subverted somewhat by the recent Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which does feature a dead mom in a magical village, but the lure of her voice was only a trick to get to release a bunch of demon-like creatures from out of the Dark Gate, which does underscore the moral of this movie and most movies, which is don't open something called the Dark Gate. Come on. It's a bad game. But the biggest inversion of this inexplicable trope comes in Detective Pikachu, which ends with our hero discovering that his dead dad is A, still alive, and B, instead of a fantasy land, his dad was actually stuck inside of Pikachu, which is probably a crime in the States, but in Japan, it's just a Tuesday.
If your dad was here, he would you so hard, your bones would pop.
I'm not saying that all of these writers' moms and Ryan Reynolds disappeared when they were young and they're secretly hoping they'll find them one day in a magical realm and sporting power armor, but I'm not saying... Some writers write about strained relationships with their parents, but some write about how they want to bang their parents to death. Star Wars is essentially the story of a young boy trying to kill his dad with an electric dildo, and Back to the Future is about a boy desperately trying not to bang his mom and like, just barely missing. He just like...
Nobody said anything about hitting her. You're just gonna take a few liberties with her.
See, the Oedipal complex and unconscious lust for the mother and hatred for the father won't die and continues to manifest in a surprising amount of modern mainstream movies. It's no secret that the DC Extended Universe is a tangled web of neuroses and anxieties, but Zack Snyder's Justice League really wears its psychosexual issues right on top of its sculpted rubber codpiece.
I will come.
For starters, the whole movie is about the villain trying to get his fingers all up inside of his mother's box? And incidentally, the box is kept on top of a pedestal that looked kind of like a dick. Plus, let's not forget that this is a sequel to a movie in which two superpowered bros only stopped from murdering each other because their moms were both named Bertha.
Why did you say that name?
Marvel gets in on this sexy action too. As I mentioned, Guardians of the Galaxy 2 has Star-Lord fighting and killing his space dad to defend his mom's... And even Spider-Man Homecoming plays out a version of the Oedipal urge. Peter Parker's maternal figure is Aunt May, who almost everyone relates to on a deep sexual level, probably because she looks like Marissa Tomei. And in a surprising twist, it turns out that the villain is Peter's girlfriend's dad. And while this is not his actual dad, Peter's ascent to manhood is still dependent upon him taking out a dad and having sex with its offspring. And also, that dad is 80s Batman and therefore the metaphorical dad to all modern superheroes, so you get my point. Perhaps the most on-the-nose version of this is Edgar Wright's Baby Driver, in which the hero, whose lack of sexual experience is underscored by the fact that his name is literally Baby, well, he falls in love. And who does he fall in love with? Why, a waitress named Deborah from the same diner where his mom worked. And if that's not enough, in Baby's fantasies, he gives Deborah a different haircut that looks more like his mom's, which makes me feel weird. And fulfilling the wanting to murder your dad part of this complex, we learn that Baby's mom was abused by his alcoholic father, and then in the third act, Baby finds himself battling a wrathful John Hamm, who, is a guy that's famous for playing a crappy alcoholic dad.
You keep it down. I'm trying to drink.
And movies are weird, especially if you take a couple leaps, which I guess we're doing. But okay, so that was all pretty dark and sad and sexy, but not all blood relatives are bad. In fact, there's a whole slew of movies that rewrite the laws of genetics just to showcase how cool it is to be related to our actual family. Like, we all inherit something from them, right? Like looks, medical conditions, haunted estates we can only claim by spending the night, but family-positive characters are always passing on specific skill sets to their offspring, as if there was some kind of dominant expertise gene. Take Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull. The character of Mutt is just a typical leather-clad greaser, but once we find out that he's secretly Indy's son, he realizes he's apparently inherited incredible feats of adventuring from his old man, such as swinging from vine to vine along with his CGI monkeys from Jumanji. But unlike Indiana Jones, he doesn't, brutally kill a ton of people in the process, so I guess he pussed out on that gene. Clearly this was meant to tee up Mutt as a replacement for Indy in further adventures, a plan that backfired once Shia LaBeouf pivoted from acting to insincere public apologies, forcing Harrison Ford to once again risk his 80-year-old bones hunting fake treasures.
What's the challenge for you in coming back to the same role years later?
I'm trying not to look silly.
Just do it! But the Mutt stuff makes even less sense considering that Indy's father in The Last Crusade was a bookish nerd and definitely not the rough and tumble adventurer type. Like, we spent a whole movie learning that these specific character traits aren't genetic, but, family.
Dad! Oh, Dad! Oh, Dad! What?
Whatever, moving on. In The Boondock Saints, the big screen adaptation of the popular early 2000s dorm room poster, the twins seemingly inherited their gunplay talents from their dad, even though they never knew him growing up because he was in prison. It's as if being a badass hired killer is like the male pattern baldness of this universe.
That was a good time to get those mouth.
And the heroine of the recent Scream reboot turns out to be the secret love child of the killer from the original movie, and in the end, while fighting the new Ghostface, she warns him to never mess with the daughter of a serial killer before grabbing a knife and stabbing the crap out of him. Like with the Boondock Saints, this character never knew her father, but in the world of Scream, apparently she is just biologically predisposed to have an aptitude for stabbing people with a giant hunting knife. When will science isolate the stabbing gene? Just do it! So don't worry, kids. Your parents might be getting a divorce because your magical armor-wearing mom keeps going out for cigarettes, which cause you to want to have sex with and or kill them both, but maybe they've genetically passed along their sick lightsaber skills that'll help you fall in with the criminal gang that can become a bloodthirsty family surrogate. Ha! I think my doctor work here is done. You're welcome. You have AIDS.